Dad podcast. We have an exciting CMO to showcase for you guys today. Armin Molavi is a seasoned global brand architect and an enterprise marketing exec and the chief marketing officer of Instructure, the edtech giant behind Canvas, the world's leading learning management platform. With over 20 years of experience leading massive brand transformations, Armin specializes in taking complex legacy organizations and modernizing their marketing narrative. Before stepping into the edtech space at Instructure, he built a powerhouse career on both the agency and corporate brand sides. Notably, he served as the global head of media and marketing operations at Hilton, where he managed their international agency ecosystem, drove massive digital efficiency, and helped steer the hospitality giant through an era of aggressive digital transformation. Armin was also a senior leadership leader at elite global creative networks, including Digitas and Havas, shaping the North American global brand strategies for iconic Fortune 500 companies. Celebrated for his ability to bridge heavy data metrics with emotional, resonant creative execution, Armin is highly regarded in the CMO community for solving the trust gap between marketing spend and enterprise business outcomes. Armin, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, Dylan. Thanks for having me.
It's
always weird to hear that blurb about yourself, but it is appreciated.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, maybe you can contextualize it for us a little bit. I know that's a lot of accolades, but why don't you take us back to the beginning? So where'd you grow up? What'd you study? And what got you into the agency and brand marketing worlds?
Yeah, grew up in Long Island. Proud Long Island boy. Went to UMass Amherst, and I always wanted to be in advertising.
Wow.
I started as a marketing major. I dipped into an accounting major for like one hot second, realized I would be a terrible accountant, and went running back to marketing. And when I graduated, I lucked out getting a role at Digitas, and I remember, to give you some context, I called my parents and said, I got this job at this new agency. And my mom said, what do they do? And I said, they build internet websites. And my mom said, Armin, I don't know if this is a good idea. The internet seems like a fraud. And so that's the context as to when I started. And it was awesome being at Digitas in those days. Like, everything we were doing was the first time doing it. You know, we launched the first website for so many companies. We launched the first e-commerce website for so many companies. And, I remember working on B&Q, which is the Home Depot of the UK, and trying to figure out, like, what is an e-commerce experience for a home improvement store was awesome. Like, we didn't have a shopping cart at that time. And so many really great experiences. I loved working at Arnold. And then after 20 years on the agency side, one of my old clients pulled me into Hilton, which, it's such a storied brand and such an amazing company to be a part of with, at the time, 17 brands, Waldorf Astoria, Hilton, it was amazing. And, one of the projects I did there was to do the segmentation strategy for Hilton Honors and 100 million guests worldwide to get to run around the world and talk to people about what hospitality should mean and what hospitality should be like. And, it's travel is such a funny thing, because whether it's for leisure or, for business, you're not home.
Yeah.
And it's such a weird thing to think about, because it's, in one way it seems so obvious, but you're not home. And, for a property to make you feel at home is such a emotional benefit to people. And I remember talking to one guest, asking her, like, why she loved Hampton so much. And she said to me, no matter which one I go to, I know exactly what I'm going to walk into. And that feels great. And that feeling is what contextualizes, like, the really important part about travel, right? It's not just where are you going, it's also where are you sleeping. It's also, where is your home base for that period of time. And the folks there at Hilton were amazing. I was traveling too much, and so my kids were 4, and so then I decided to leave Hilton, and I broke out on my own. I spent about 5 years building my own strategy practice, primarily working with private equity firms. They would point me at underperforming portcos, and I would just go in and help their marketing teams like figure stuff out and fix the strategy, fix the targeting, fix the brand, sometimes fix the like agency structure. And in some situations I partnered with the CMO. In some situations I was the interim CMO. And to be exposed to so many different kinds of companies and so many smart people in such a condensed amount of time was just really awesome, and lots to learn. And KKR was one of them, and I really enjoy the folks at KKR. They asked me to start working at Instructure. I was supposed to stay for only like 6 or 8 months and do my thing and kind of go on my merry way, but I was there for about 2.5 months, and Steve, our CEO, asked me to stay, and I gave up my practice and
wow,
CMO, which, I've had so many people come up to me and be like, you were living the dream. Like you ran away from corporate America, you had it. And, they ask me why. And it's so 2 simple answers. The executive team is at Instructure is so awesome to work with. I love figuring stuff out with them. And it's the same for my marketing leadership team. I love working with them. They are awesome people. It's an awesome team. And you get to this point where I just want to wake up and work with cool people. I want to work with awesome people on really cool business challenges, and hopefully do better and make the world better. And you look at what we do, you look at the fact that we help over 13,000 educational institutions around the world educate so many people. It feels good. So that's the, I think, short version of the bit.
I love it. I love it. I love I like the context on, there's a few things that I think are worth drilling down just from your bio before we even get into the questions. But, I think you're right. I think this whole new fractional CMO thing, whether that's just a rebrand of freelancer or what, it seems like it is kind of the brass ring that a lot of people are running towards. And I've been doing it for 1.5 years now, and I definitely enjoy parts of it, but there is a loneliness, like you're working with clients, but you're not really, you're not part of the organization. You're still kind of looked at to some degree as an outsider. And, I think you're right. Like, I think after COVID, especially, like there was the whole digital nomad work from home thing that was good for a minute, but, it also, there's also some real value in getting to wake up every day and have conversations, whether it's top down or bottom up with, just really smart people and people that fill you up and challenge you and all the things. So I think it's good perspective to maybe some marketers who are in corporate world today, who are maybe listening to the show and saying, gosh, I can't wait till I can launch my, fractional gig and, get back to being a practitioner again or whatever. But I think, there's 2 sides to every coin, or the grass is always greener.
Yeah,
right?
the grass is always greener.
All those things.
It is lonely. I think I was talking to someone yesterday, actually, who's launching their own recruiting agency. And, he was asking me, like, what do you think I need to do as, like, I go out on my own? And you need a village. You need a village of people that you can bounce ideas off of, talk things through, vent when you need to vent. And, when you live that fractional life, or like entrepreneur life, it's hard to have that. And I really push everyone I know to like build that network, because you're going to need it.
Super smart. All right, so let's get into Instructure. So, whenever we're talking to B2B marketers, no matter how big and dominant they are in their categories, sometimes we need to contextualize where they sit and how they sit within the ecosystem. So tell us a little bit about Instructure for those that don't know it. Tell us about Canvas. And you talked about your 13,000 folks that are, a percentage of them are going to show up with you in a couple of weeks here in Louisville. Who is it that you serve, and what do you guys do for them?
Yeah, we've been around for over 20 years. We have, as I mentioned, over 13,000 customers worldwide. We operate in all the major continents. We are very fortunate to have a very significant customer base here in the US and North America, yeah, and around the world. We developed a learning management software platform, which at this point, if you haven't been in college in a while, your LMS is the center of your being, right? Like all of
Mm.
your courses, all of your communications with your professors, all of it is in this one platform. And so it is your hub. It is your daily hub for everything you do. Um, and what's so fascinating is even, putting aside the like remote learning and all that, we've enabled so many people to be able to go back to school or go get degrees in ways that they never imagined. And it's really, really amazing to see. I have one amazing story about this Army veteran. He finished his term, his service in the Army, became an electrical engineer, did it for 30 years, kids out of the house, empty nest. He decided he wanted to do something else, retired, and went back to school to become a physical therapist. And when you think about our lives getting longer, our longevity getting longer, you know, at a certain point, people are going to start looking for what is that third act, and what do they want to do in their 50s and 60s and 70s in ways that our parents never considered, right? It's so amazing to see how people are finding ways to change their lives, whether they're in their 50s or 60s or in their 20s. They never thought they'd go to college. It's pretty amazing. And so, you see the impact that our platform has at all of these schools, K-12 and up. It's a pretty amazing experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love hearing about the ways that accessibility to learning, I think, is changing. As somebody who hasn't been in school except for the occasional, guest lecture at a marketing program every once in a while. It's interesting whenever I talk to college marketers on the show or companies that support that ecosystem or agencies. On one hand, you've got this kind of interesting tailwind, right, or headwind right now with a declining birth rate in the U.S. and globally, a lot of markets are challenged with like a smaller generation of potential, what you would consider college age students.
Yeah.
Those 18-year olds coming into the workforce, and then you've got a lot of parents and kids kind of jointly making the decision of like, okay, well, what does a four-year degree mean? What does it guarantee? What are outcomes? What are the cost benefits and cost ratios? But then also this explosion of like distance learning, e-learning, people going back to school, like you said, in different stages of their careers. So I'd be curious, what are your, as a marketer that spends a lot of time in this larger pool of the education space, what are some of the things that you are noticing that are challenges, but where do you see some of the opportunities kind of from a macro level?
Yeah, look, I think, what you bring up about like students and parents like re-looking at the 4-year, education process, it's the right answer for so many students. And it's not the right answer for so many students. And I think when you start looking at like micro certificates and micro credentials, and you start thinking about, the learner that wants to get really good at AI and wants to take classes that may not be offered where they live, but also has a passion in some other area and they want to mix the two, they don't have to look for this magical degree, this one school that offers what they want to do. They can take the onus to piece together the different kinds of learning that they think make most sense for what they want to contribute to society, what they want to do with their career. And being able to help our schools facilitate that and helping them market the offerings that they have is huge. I'm on the advisory board for Harvard's continuing ed program and School of Continuing Ed, and people love taking courses from Harvard and getting degrees, or micro certificates from Harvard, and people all over the world now can just do it. And it's amazing. It's wild. It's life-changing for these people. And, it's about making the reality seem within grasp, because I think that's the thing that is such a bummer to me sometimes, is you talk to people and they think it's not within reach. You talk to people and they feel like it's not feasible. How am I going to do this with my current job, or, et cetera, et cetera. And when they start really looking into it, it's all there. It's all sitting there, and it's just really exciting to see and be a part of. And the big challenge for edtech at large, I think, is making people realize that there is so many options out there for you, and the physical accessibility, the time accessibility, is just not really a barrier anymore.
Wow, I love that. It reminds me kind of the marketing paradigm that educational institutions are moving into, at least for their distance learning or their continuing ed programs, at the top of the list. It almost reminds me a little bit of what happened in the publishing industry. You had newspapers that were local and delivered to your front door, and local journalism was important. But now you have these institutions being able to essentially capture demand nationally, even globally, for distance learning programs. In a world where, students can access you from anywhere, they don't have to sit on your campus or be in a physical room for a period of time. How important is it for educational brands to be able to build something that has not only brand recognition, everybody knows who Harvard is, but what does Harvard mean, and what does that brand cachet transfer to later on in life? Or even just from it's like if I could go train with my favorite sports team for summer camp or something to learn how to become a better basketball player, I probably would pick the one that I liked. I mean, maybe that's a bad example, but I think I'd be curious, how are you seeing brands kind of investing in their brand, knowing that they're pooling from this larger group of students now?
I think it's funny I think a number of schools are starting to really understand that they are a brand, right? That they have a value proposition. And it's not just Harvard. All of these schools have a meaning in their communities. I spent a lot of time in Manila recently, meeting a lot of our customers there. And, we have one customer out there that is building a world-class hotel restaurant program and offering it to everyone in the region, and you're talking about a program that is now, able to leverage and partner with schools from around the world if they want to, and create a really diverse learning experience that not only can be customized for their students, but it allows them to tell the story of, come to our school and we will help you figure out what to learn, right? And we will help you figure out how to craft your next venture in life. And, taglines are such a funny thing in advertising. And, one of the things that I'm so proud of here is when we redid our brand last year and we landed on our new tagline of setting potential in motion. That's what it is. That is what education is all about. And all of our schools, all of our customers are doing that for all of their, students. And it's about them inspiring people in their ecosystem to set their potential in motion.
That's very cool.
That sounds, but it means a lot to all of us here at Instructure.
No, I love it. I think it's a very values-based brand tagline, and it seems like something that you guys definitely live and lean into. Already in the short time that we've spent talking, you've brought up two customer stories, one from the perspective of the end user that you service through your partners, the story of this Army vet that went back to school to train as a physical therapist. And then you also brought up a story of an educational institution in Manila who's training the next generation of hospitality workers in their region. It seems like telling your story through both your customers, but your customers' customers seems to be kind of core to your storytelling already in the few examples that you gave. Is that essentially your guys' B2B marketing strategy, uplifting customer stories and then allowing them to lift up their customer stories? Is that your strategy?
I think it's part of it. Look, I think that, I think that it's so funny you said that. You said the phrase that drives me bonkers, which is B2B marketing. It's, for someone who spent 25 years on the B2C side and is sitting as the CMO of a B2B company for the first time in his life, you still have to understand what your target is going through. You still have to understand, like, what is their day-to-day like? What are their challenges? Whether they're the dean, the LMS administrator, the professor, the student, the potential student, you have to understand what matters to them. You have to understand, like, what drives them. And, I loved my agency run. I loved my clients. I think back to my years on Procter & Gamble. I did oral care, Crest and Oral-B and Crest White Strips for 3 years. I did nothing but oral care for 3 years, running around the world, talking to people about brushing their teeth. And you really, when you talk to people about such a basic thing, and you can get to such really amazing insights about, the moms that take pride in knowing that their kids and their, family's mouths are as healthy as they can be. And then you have the other people who they validate, they value the, like, outward expression of their smile as the key reason why they engage with the category, right? Or the people who are like, why do you use what you use? And they're like, well, that's what my mom used to buy, so I still use that. Like,
legacy.
And they say that with nostalgia,
Yeah.
And on taking the time to understand that, taking the time to really understand, like, what motivates people, what connects people to the category. P&G, Amex, Hilton, these are the brands that taught me that. It's something that I don't see happening as much in B2B marketing. I think that the two biggest lies in B2B marketing, if you ask me, are this product market fit concept. The Kevin Costner, like, Fields of Dreams, if you build it, they will come strategy is just not a thing. Like, you still, right? It's, the LMS administrator still has a budget, just like mom does, doesn't have a big enough budget, just like mom does, has to make tough decisions, just like mom does, and has a lot of stakeholders to make happy, just like mom does, at P&G. And if you don't take the time to really understand that, you're not going to get to interesting marketing. You're just going to have this, like, feature parade of, like, our platform can do this and this and this and this. And it's just not compelling, And I think when you start getting into the stories that I was telling you about, that's what the deans want to see out of their schools. That's the impact that professors want to have. That's what the LMS administrator wants to enable. And so, product market fit just isn't enough, right? And you got to spend the time to really understand these people and these, their motivators and their struggles, so that you can find the right level of empathy to connect with them. No different than mom, no different than a car buyer who's in the middle of a midlife crisis. Like, it's all the same thing. Like, what's driving you to make these decisions? And you just got to understand it, and you got to take the time. And that's why I've been running around talking to all of our customers as much as I can.
I love it. Yeah, I think the insight into this idea that people buy from people. At the end of the day, we don't buy from companies, we buy from people, and we buy from organizations from a B2B context who understand what my day-to-day problems are and can hopefully try and help me solve them. But more than anything, they empathize with what I deal with as the person that I show up to as a professional in the office each week. How do you think about that idea of drilling down to insights and, that people buy from people, but, also I think it's I think so many people with how many AI tools are spinning up and at what speed, people are just, they're scared to make the wrong decision as a B2B buyer, even when they have budget to deploy. I see this as, somebody who's got money to spend in the ad tech space often and am completely, overwhelmed by the amount of inbound emails that I get from companies that sound like they do something interesting but never seem to deliver. When the buy decision has more consequence, how do you go about building trust with an end user when if they make the wrong decision, they feel like the consequences might be, their professional standing or quite literally their job?
Yeah, look, I think the consequences of B2B buying are obviously a little bit different than B2C. Although I do think there are very heavy consequences on the B2C side. I can share a story with you on that front too.
Let's do it.
But look, I think, first of all, one of the reasons why I love working at this company is so many of us actually come from the space. We have a ton of former K-12 teachers. We have a ton of former educators at the high ed level. I myself am an adjunct professor at Brandeis. We know what it's like to be in the classroom. We know what it's like to administer these programs, run these kinds of schools. And so, we start with that base of insight. And we spend massive amounts of time with all of our different stakeholders and, people that impact these buying decisions. I think you gotta, start off with yes, we can deliver on your basic needs, good old Maslow, start with the base, yes, we got these functions, yes, we can do these things, but now let's talk about the more important stuff. We can enable these kinds of courses, we can enable this kind of reach for your school, we can help educators teach in a different way, we can help the K-5 school not rely on screens that much. We don't advocate necessarily for tons of screen time. I myself, my kids are in they just finished 5th grade. I don't want them spending time on iPads all day either. You gotta help figure out what are the challenges that these, all these different stakeholders are going through and figure out address the basic needs, but then move on to the higher order needs. And yes, the stakes are higher in the sense that picking an LMS is a big decision. Rolling out an LMS is a big effort, right? It's not easy to just get a school of 2,000 people or a K-12 of 600, 1,200 students to switch platforms, right? It's not an easy decision. But when you can show up and say, we've done this before, we know how to make the transition happen without it being painful. We know your school's situation. We've taken the time to really understand what's going on in your school district. These are the same kinds of challenges we've seen at these other districts, either in your state, similar size, school districts that you admire, and really being able to give them that comfort that making this decision is the right decision for them, right? Is what you have to do. I do disagree with the fact that the stakes are higher because I will tell you, and I will never forget this woman. I will never forget her. I was working on Choice Hotels. I was doing focus groups in Chicago. And I was talking to this woman about what is it going to take for you to plan another one more trip this summer? That's all we wanted. One more trip. She was talking to me about this and that, and she's going to use her iPad to plan a route and all these fun things. And I said, so great, why aren't you doing it? And she looked at me, and with the greatest of sincerity, she looked at me and said, I don't want to disappoint my family. And I was really confused because at the time I did not have kids. And I looked at her and I said, I don't get it. Tell me. And she said, look, Summer here in Chicago is 9 weeks long. If I am going to tell my husband and tell my kids that we're going to go do this road trip for 6 days, I'm taking them away from their friends. I'm taking them away from their camp. I'm taking them away from a barbecue that, they may want to go to or may want to throw. I have to make sure that this trip is better than that.
Wow.
I don't want to disappoint them. And so you're talking to me about stakes, Dylan. Those are high stakes.
Yeah.
And I bring it up because I really don't believe it's that different in B2B or B2C. Like, the stakes are real. Yes. Make the wrong decision at work, you might lose your job, right? But it's kind of equally bad to disappoint your family, if you ask me, right?
Or maybe worse, right?
Or maybe worse. And so, I really do think that B2B marketing needs to spend just a lot more time really understanding the why behind what these decision makers want. Why do you need this functionality? What are you looking to do with it? What problem is it solving for? Some of our competitors are free. And, I talk to them about the real cost of free, because nothing in life is free, and, I sit there and I say to them, why do you like this free one? And they're like, well, it's free. And I'm like, okay, how do you do this? How do you do that? How do you roll up your reporting? How do you validate
value?
Yeah. How do you validate all the coursework is, accessible and in compliance? And they're like, oh, we don't, or, oh, we have someone that rolls up all the data. And I'm like, oh, so it's not really free, and all of a sudden the reality of these decisions, the gravity of these decisions become real. And you can start connecting with people on a more meaningful level than feature parade, which makes me crazy.
I think you talked about another important element of B2B, which is a lot of times, that there are better tools out there, that there are innovations happening, and that you might have the best feature set, like you said. Mm-hmm. But oftentimes it's pulling the Band-Aid, idea. I'm just going to stay in the thing that we've been using because we're integrated and we're working, and it may not be perfect, and I may like these other things, and life would be better if I could only get to that promised land. But the pain from getting to here to there is just more than I can bear conceptually. How do you bring a buyer on that journey of bringing them to the new future of what life's going to look like when they do have this better product, but helping them bridge the idea that the gap between where they are today and where they want to go can be less painful than they may conceive in their mind?
Yeah, look, the phrase I use at work with the team is, we have to prove to them that we're better enough. What I mean by that is, we're better than the current, enough so that it's enough to make it worth overcoming the inertia, right? It's got to be that much better. But that's only one part of it, right? Because the fear then is, okay, I switch to you. How do I know in 2 years' time, someone else isn't going to be better enough, than you? And I think that's the other, big thing for us is, we are extremely proud of not just our product roadmap, but also, we have a academic office that is, part of their role is really just understanding where the future of education is going. We are not building Canvas for where education is today. We are building Canvas for where education is going, where the hockey puck is going. And I really do believe that you have to convince people that this is the last time you're going to choose an LMS. And the reason why this is going to be the last time you're going to choose an LMS is because you're going to have enough confidence in us that we know where the space is going. And we spend a lot of time proving that.
I love it. You said something that I thought was interesting in the bio as well about the more time going back to Hilton, which I feel like was formative for you. This idea of consistency, the idea that, and trust, right? That you can show up anywhere, in the world. And that when you show up to a Homewood Suites, I think was the example that you gave me, that brand experience is going to be consistent, or at least palatable to the idea that like I may not be at home, but when I'm on the road, this is what home looks like. How do you talk about that consistency in the world of that you are operating in today? Like how does
How
brand
does that
consistency?
manifest?
Yeah,
Yeah.
how does that
Yeah.
manifest?
There's a couple ways. I think that one big way is, as the, like, let's talk about high ed for a moment. Within the world of high ed, adjunct teachers, part-time teachers, part-time educators is becoming a bigger and bigger part of the mix of education. And so, given the fact that we have such a dominant market share, they're confident that when they bring in an adjunct, there's a pretty good shot these adjuncts know how to use Canvas because they've probably done Canvas before, and so I think that's number one. That's a big, big way that that we drive that consistency. I think the other big one is with students. What's interesting is, when you let educators, and this happens more so on the K-12 side, but when you let educators pick their own platforms, and one chooses this and one chooses that and one chooses that, it's hard for the student. As they navigate from course to course, it's different UX, different this, different that. And one of the things that we hear all the time from our K-12s is the students love that every class is the same structure. Everything is in one place, and it relieves that cognitive stress of understanding the website, and it lets them use that cognitive energy on their class. And I think that's right. Like, we don't want Canvas to be an impediment. Like, Canvas needs to facilitate learning as much as possible, whether it's freeing up time for the teacher or relieving that cognitive load for the student so that they can focus on their coursework. That's what it's all about, and I hear it so many times, like, oh, I just graduated college in K-12 and I just realized that my new school is Canvas. I'm so psyched. I don't have to worry about learning another one. It means a lot to students, and that consistency in the experience is a powerful thing when you have the market share that we do.
You talked about this evolving trend of adjuncts, especially in the world of distance learning, people who are teaching classes that aren't traditionally educators or consider themselves educators. I've had some conversations with colleges here in the San Diego region about teaching a creator marketing course. Those conversations I've learned they happen in years versus quarters or months. But when you bring up another important component, when you have a growing share of people delivering education in professional settings where there are units and credits on the line or at minimum certifications, but they're not traditionally teachers, how important it is having a system like Canvas that is intuitive, but does it also teach them how to be a teacher in the way that with the way that it designs, helping you create a lesson plan or a syllabus or the things that you need to be a good educator? Is it a bit plug and play in that way of like, prompting you for the things that you need in order to design a good course?
That's one of the things that I love about what we've done with AI in our platform. You can start teaching and our tool will take all of your planned assignments and help you create rubrics. Which, for someone who hasn't taught, creating rubrics is way more time consuming than you'd think. And just being able to help these, like, to use your vernacular, like non-professional educators, right? Because they are professionals in other places, to help them figure out all this stuff so much more quickly, especially with an agent that can just answer their questions on the spot, enables so much more teaching. Like, when I started teaching, which was before I started at Instructure, building my course for the first time was like 60, 70 hours of work, whether it's and you want the educators to spend as much time as possible on that content, not learning the UX. and so now we've got all of these tools embedded into Canvas to help people do exactly that. And when we built Canvas Career, which is our new version of Canvas specifically for non-high ed, non-12, you're talking about people that are not permanent educators. You're talking about L&D programs in corporate America. You're talking about, fire departments that need to recertify, their employees in various things. You don't have professional educators on spot, and you got to help them be able to achieve the learning objectives that they have. And it's and I think also in a world of increasing competitiveness for talent, it's going to become more and more important for companies to really invest in L&D and invest in reskilling so that their current employee base doesn't leave. Like feeling like you're constantly learning at work is a major part of retention now.
Interesting.
You're working at a company and you're like, I'm not learning anything anymore. You're going to leave. And as you leave, all that institutional knowledge goes out the door. The recruiting costs, the retraining costs, all of it. And I can guarantee you it's going to be costly to find that person, costly to redeploy it, the cost of that seat being empty. The days of L&D being like a nice to fund in corporate America are over. And
wow.
You have to, how do you retrain, your employee base on how to use Claude? How do you, where are you gonna, you got to get them to learn it. You need to do these things. And, these people, the people in charge of that kind of learning agenda at these companies are not educators. They're not educators by trade, and we need to make sure that the platform relieves them of that stress.
I love it. Yeah, I think it's a interesting evolution where you guys are headed. Like you've got originally a TAM of all educational institutions, and now you've got this larger TAM of like basically anybody who wants to teach their people in order to make them better, keep them more relevant, keep them more cutting edge, but also retain them, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, like think about, like, for example, a cruise line. If you think about a cruise line, all their employees constantly on ships, lifeguards that constantly need to be recertified, chefs that may need to learn like new menus, you gotta constantly be educating people. What are you gonna do? Take them off the ship for 2 weeks so that they can listen? That's not a thing. How are you gonna keep them educated? How are you gonna keep them up to speed? How are you gonna keep their credentials valid? It's a must.
Yeah, it's exciting.
It's not an option anymore.
All right. So while I have a CMO on the line who comes from agency world, I feel like I would be doing a disservice on not getting a little bit of your take on agency acquisition and management of complex agency ecosystems. You spent time as the head of media and marketing ops at Hilton. You've been at big agencies like Havas and Digitas. As you sit in a corporate CMO seat today, what do you think is the biggest flaw in how agencies pitch and service enterprise clients? How can they do a better job of speaking the actual language of business outcomes?
I think it's that last bit that you just said, Dylan. I think that, you've got a CEO and the board, or the executive team and the board, like creating a business strategy. The CMO has to convert that business strategy into a marketing strategy. And they have to figure out how to deploy that strategy with a variety of folks, whether it's internal, external, whatever the case may be. And the creative agency needs to learn how to turn that marketing strategy into comms. And if you don't have a clear understanding of the business strategy as to why, the creative is going to miss the mark. The marketing, the media is going to miss the mark. I was talking to one of the portcos that I still advise, and we redid the whole digital acquisition algorithm. We leveraged all of the Google tools to reduce CAC and all the fun things. But now that we've got this machine up and running and working, like now I want to start tweaking it. Like I want to distribute the dollars more differently because I'm willing to pay more for CAC, for a customer in Atlanta versus Chicago or whatever it may be. And there are times where the agency doesn't understand those business mechanics, right? And they're like, no, if you do it in Atlanta, the CAC's going to go up. And I'm like, yes, I know the CAC's going to go up. The lifetime value is also higher in that market. So it's okay, and if you don't understand the business, if you're not spending enough time understanding the business, you're not going to do great marketing. And I don't think agencies are spending enough time on that. And I think part of the problem is the clients. I think clients are reticent to tell their agencies everything. I think that clients are reticent to tell their media partners everything. And if they don't know the why, they're only going to just be order takers and do what you ask them to do. But if you teach them the why, they're going to come up with way better things than you are.
Do you think that hesitancy is intentional? Is it by accident because they're busy and being pulled in so many different directions? What do you think that what do you think that gap of showing all the cards, so to speak, comes from? And how can agencies, media partners, all the players close that gap?
I think the agencies need to showcase to explain the why they need to know it. Yeah. When I was on my own and I started working for different portfolio companies, I would ask the CEO, I would say to them like, hey, where's the investment strategy from the PE firm that bought you? And they would always look at me and say, why? And I'm like, you have some of the smartest people in the world who did all of this due diligence on your company. They bought your company. They must have a hypothesis as to how to grow your company. Right? Like, and they do every time. There's like 4 or 5 pillars.
Decent place to start, right?
Marketing usually has a lot to do with like 1 or 2. There may be one that like we kind of contribute. There's one that we have nothing to do with because it might be ops or something else. But the minute you have a real understanding of all that, you can start building real strategy. And it's the same thing with non-PE backed. Like, I haven't worked in Hilton for so long, so this is outdated. I don't feel bad saying this stuff. Like, I would call my agency and say, like, we got to move money out of the like luxury campaign into the like Hampton campaign. And they would look at me and they'd be like, but the CAC is higher. I'm like, I know, but I need this. Like, there's a strategic reason why I need to fill all my Hamptons. Like, it does all of these things. It does have a ripple effect, right? And if you don't explain it, they're just going to look at you and be like, ugh, you're an annoying client. Da, da, da. And I joke around with people, but it's like, I have people call me and they're like, oh, I'm so unhappy with my agency. And I'm like, why? And they tell me these things. And I'm like, have you told them this? They're like, no. I'm like, why not? They're like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, can I ask you a question? They're like, what? I was like, if your spouse took you to divorce court, and in divorce court, the judge was like, why do you want a divorce? And your spouse started rattling off all these things that they never brought up to you. Does that sound logical? And they're like, no, that makes no sense. I'm like, it's the same thing. Like, brand agency relationship is a marriage. Full stop.
Totally.
Full stop. And the quality of the work out of the agency is a full reflection of the quality of the relationship between the agency and the brand. And the brands that blame the agencies for bad work are usually the worst clients. So
ooh, that's a hot take. That one's getting clipped. Oh man.
Come on. I see how many agency people you've had on this podcast. They're gonna love it. Come on.
No, it'll be great. I love. Well, look, I think that's the value of having someone like yourself who's sat on so many sides of it and has kind of broken free at one point is that you can be fairly candid about some of the dynamics. It brings up another. I had a conversation with an agency leader the other day that said, his goal whenever he works with a client is to make sure that if they only get 1 hour of FaceTime with the CMO or whoever their client lead is each week, that's going to be the best hour of that client's week. Do you think some agencies have lost that magic? What do you think is, if you only have an hour of FaceTime with your client, whether that's in person or on the phone each week, what are some things that you think you can do to maximize that outcome of it being the best hour of their week?
That you have to remember that you are outside of the building and you have to show up with an unvarnished POV. That, if you're not showing up with your agency's thoughtful POV that is not contorted to keep people happy that are inside the client, you're not doing the job. You need to give them your real opinion, because otherwise they should just build a team in-house. And one of the things, it's funny, as I say that out loud, Dylan, I have an amazing in-house agency team.
Sure.
And my creative lead, Tony, I have flat out told her she's got to argue with me. We have to argue. And if you look back at some of the bigger advertising kerfuffles, I will not name them, more often than not, they're tied to in-house agencies. And I'm not critiquing the in-house agency. I am critiquing the culture of not saying what you really think. And, I think what an external agency brings you is that external point of view. And I think if you've got that 1 hour, you got to show up and say, look, this is new. This is a viewpoint that I don't think you're considering. And look, it may help, it may not help, it may not change things, but it shows that CMO that you are thinking about this business beyond the echo chamber of what's happening inside the company. And that's what you gotta do.
I love it. You brought up the idea of in-housing and out-housing. You've obviously looked at it from a few different points of view. Where are you spending the most time thinking about in-housing? What capabilities have you brought in-house and why? And then where are you still going to agencies for external thinking or support? And where do you think they have the most value these days?
I think for the edtech space, if you don't have real edtech experience, it's really hard to come off authentically. Whether it's our marketing campaigns or even just our case studies, you really need to know the space, which I venture would be really hard for a third-party agency, for an external agency. I think that it just the amount of time it would take to really understand all the different kinds of stakeholders, I just don't think is feasible. And I think the problem that some B2B companies run into is we don't have the big budgets of P&G. And so it's hard for me to engage an external agency on a full year ongoing AOR with all sorts of people to dedicate their time to really understand our customers the way I need them to be understood. So we've made that decision to say the core of our brand, the core of our business, the core of our storytelling needs to be brought in-house and needs to be done that way. But we need to make it very clear to our in-house team that they are expected to disagree. They are expected to push back. They are expected to say, this doesn't make sense, because without that, we're kind of stuck. For when we bring external, we don't have expertise in every media channel. We don't have, I don't espouse to say that we have TikTok experts or LinkedIn experts or, how do you really drive engagement in all of these different channels? And so we, and it doesn't make sense for me to have all those people either. I can't have the social media team of Duolingo. I just can't. I love the work. I just don't have that kind of budget. I wish I did. and I don't have it, and so I've got to figure out different ways of, bringing in that insight. And part of it is, agencies where I can hire partial, parts of people so that they can help us. And, quite frankly, from time to time, we look at projects and we're like, you know what, fresh thinking would be right here. Something that, Tony, my creative director, she and I, we've had like really honest conversations about like, when do we need that fresh perspective? The brand work, we did all in-house. Because there's no BBDO, Saatchi. I love those agencies. I love the work they've done, but the amount of time it would take for them to really understand our target, I don't have that kind of time. And we did all the brand work in-house ourselves.
Yeah, I can see that. That's the one thing, like, even, I worked on the Adobe business for 7 years at an agency, and even something as ubiquitous as creativity or creative tooling, it took a lot of learning to get up to speed on their product set and their users. So that makes a lot of sense. All right. We made it almost to the end of the show without talking about AI. We mentioned Claude a couple of times, but I think that's actually a good thing. We're getting more and more, I think, less out of the hype cycle of having to address it at every turn. But, I think, we are moving from this, assistive AI tool to completely autonomous AI marketing agents that can write, test, place ads with zero human intervention. Claude, chief of staff's running our schedule and kind of helping us decide what's important and what fires to put out first. From an operational standpoint, where are you drawing the line on machine autonomy at Instructure, and what parts of the marketing mix do you think have to remain strictly human?
I'm going to speak on behalf of the marketing team at Instructure. There's all sorts of different things going on in different parts of our company that I don't want to muddy the waters on.
Of course.
There's nothing in marketing that's fully automated. And I don't, right now, I don't see it happening. Because I was speaking to someone recently, so I will take no credit for this. I said to him, I was like, how do you think about AI? And he said to me, he's like, it is not an end-to-end solution. AI is a middle-to-middle solution. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, look, you got to have the insight to start the project. And no matter what AI comes up with, you need the humanity at the end to make sure it's right. And even my Claude chief of staff, I gave me something this morning and it was like, Armin, you have this to do. And I literally replied and I was like, I did that last night. And Claude replies to me like, oh, you're right.
Isn't it crazy? They're more human than we think, and that
like, come on,
they make mistakes.
Like we're not talking about strawberry with 2 R's. We're talking about like you're like there's just, it's there. I slacked it to Rachel last night. Like, what are you talking about? And so, look, I love the way we use AI. We are scaling ourselves in ways. We're doing so much more than we ever could with the team that we have. And I love the way my team is doing more with the same set of constraints and resources and the, creative versioning and, skipping all of the like less interesting
boring stuff.
Right. I'm trying not to say boring, Dylan. I'm trying really hard to say, I really want my team to spend as much time as possible, like understanding our customers, understanding what they need. And that's not a tool. I will say, I wanted to learn as much as I could about third grade teachers. I spent a good 2 to 3 hours with Claude on like tell me about teaching, tell me about being a third grade teacher. But the first thing I did afterwards was just go hang out with teachers in my school district. And I found so many more refinements on what Claude told me that like, if I had just stopped there, the campaign would have sucked.
Wow. I love that. I think I've been hearing a lot of people talking about replacing focus groups with these synthetic audiences and that they're right 95% of the time. But I think, that human insight that you're talking about of not only having focus groups where you actually get, there's there's a chemistry that happens when you actually talk to real customers in real life that doesn't translate through deep research or AI panels. And it doesn't even translate from doing online interviews or Zoom interviews. I think it is spending time with human beings in the context of what your customer is dealing with is like unlocks the magic.
Yeah. And look, don't get me wrong. I've got synthetic people. I'm feeding gong recordings into synthetic people, like constantly like updating my synthetic people with news and this and that, and talking to my synthetic people. I hate saying that out loud, but talking to my synthetic people. I'm not saying there's no place for it. But the people that are like selling it as like, this is the end all be all and the only thing you need are selling you something. And you just got to watch out.
Well, mine thought you worked with the wrong agencies, so we'll leave it at that. All right, Armin, fascinating conversation. I really enjoyed it. If folks want to, of course, if folks want to follow along with your thought leadership or learn more about what you guys are doing, where would you like to send the audience to stay in touch?
You can find me on LinkedIn, and with a name like mine, you have no excuses because you can find me pretty easily.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on and spending some time with the audience today. If you are watching the show for the first time, don't forget to give us a follow or subscribe. It's how we bring you more amazing thought leadership. So do that. If you are listening, an honest review on whatever podcast platform you're listening on would be great. And last but not least, if there is somebody out there in edtech, especially maybe a teacher or maybe another B2B marketer that would like to learn some of the insights of Armin's amazing career and all the different agencies and categories that he's learned from to instruct the way that he's making the business marketing of higher education more exciting, definitely feel free to share the show. And with that, I will wish you a great day. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Dylan.
Cheers. Bye-bye.